Aloha and welcome to Figments, the Power of Imagination, Season 2, Episode 8. This is actually the 25th episode of the Two Types of Figments. So that means something to me, maybe not to you, but it's been a lot of fun. And this will be fun because I'm talking with my great friend Ross Rowley about postseason baseball. It's October. I love baseball. I love the postseason. And I'm going to go to a couple of National League Division Series games. So there. And I'm looking forward to that. So joining me again is Colonel Retired U.S. Air Force Ross Rowley. Hey, Ross, aloha.
Aloha, Fig. Thank you for having me on. This is like the trifecta. This is my third time on here.
You're
That's
a
awesome.
three-time convicted Figments guest, which is good. And we are going to talk about imagining postseason baseball. We're going to use your knowledge of statistics. Everybody who's watched before knows that you were a math major, a math professor at the Air Force Academy. We'll call you an instant replay influencer because you influenced the adoption of instant replay in Major League Baseball through your statistical analysis. And like you said, three-time guest, first that I've had. We both love baseball, and you can see in this photo that I've shown on the previous two episodes, I'm a Brewers fan. This is a different shirt, so I have more than one shirt. Ross wearing his Cardinals cap. That's hole number 2, isn't it, Ross?
Yes, you made
Do you know?
hole in one on that hole.
I did make a hole in one. Thanks for bringing that up. But that time I won money, but I lost money to you because we had a bet between the Cardinals and the Brewers that which team would have the best record from August 13th on. And yours had a lot to do with the health of the team. I had faith in my Brewers. It seemed like a good bet. And then your Cardinals went on a 17-game winning streak. Did you enjoy that?
I loved it. That was great. And I was asked recently by someone, is this the most fun season I've had as a fan? And I had to think about it. And it's up there. You know, it's probably in the top 5. But between the Mariners and the Cardinals going right to the end, and the 17-game streak was amazing. And it was spurred by your Brewers walk-off grand slam.
Folks, you've got to know that Ross does not believe in real-time information. So I don't care if I'm going to watch a game on DVR or whatever. I want to know what's happening now. I'm not very patient. So I get watch updates, phone updates, karma updates of the status of games. And Ross is very insistent, especially in our golf group on Saturday, that he not hear any score from any sport other than soccer, which he doesn't appear to care about. So I waited a couple hours after the Brewers walked off the Cardinals with the grand slam home run by Daniel Vogelbach and just sent him a smiley face with sunglasses. That's all. And it made him upset. It
ruined my day.
It ruined his day. But right after that, what happened? What happened?
It made my season is what happened after that.
Ruined your day, made your season, and you are very welcome. That was a great day for the Brewers. I rewatched that video then, and then that 17-game streak, it wasn't just a 17-game streak. I mean, they played consistently excellent baseball in every phase of the game. And that's fun to watch. I don't care if it's your team or not, really.
Well, like you said, I felt like they were going to go on some kind of run because of injuries, and they got Jack Flaherty back and Miles Michaelis back, and a couple others. Harrison Bader was injured earlier in the year, and he was already back. And I felt like they had all the pieces together. So I guess I was right in that sense, but nobody can predict a 17-game winning streak.
No, and it was, like I said, fun to watch. But let's talk numbers, because that's a lot more interesting than numbers other than 17. Your use of statistics, as I thought about our previous conversations, I came up with some questions I'd like you to address. And regarding statistics, were any of them just not predictive or wrong in 2021? Is there anything where this year was an outlier and what usually works didn't work?
Yes, and it's every year there's something that doesn't work. Let me just preface it with that. Fangraphs is probably the industry leader in and projections for MLB baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And just like everybody else, nobody predicted the San Francisco Giants would be as good as they were. They ended up with 108 wins. Their playoff odds at the beginning of the season was 5.7%. They were only projected for 76 wins, and they exceeded that by 31.
They're at 100% playoff odds now, I think.
Yes, they are. If you look on FanGraphs, it'll tell you that.
And that brings me to the team projections, which I think are difficult because there are two influences that don't, well, maybe three influences that aren't well represented statistically. One is injuries, because you don't know who's going to get hurt, when. The other is acquisitions and trade losses. But if you're the Cubs, it's trade losses. If you're most teams, it's acquisitions. And the third thing is the chemistry of a team, because you don't know that in spring season. You don't in spring training. You don't know how they're going to come together. So are those, those predictions that say the Giants are going to win 76 games, I think it was, are those any good at all? Or, if you want to dream about your season in March, just disregard that and hope for the best?
I think it's the latter is what you should do. Everybody, on opening day, everybody's 0-0. They're all in first place. And so hope for the best. Like my Mariners made a big run, even though they exceeded their predicted wins. They were only predicted for like 78 wins or something. They ended up with 90. They did it with a minus 50 run differential. And we talked about that last time, how important that was for success going forward. And I even discussed with my nephews when I was on vacation. I predicted in July that this wasn't going to be sustainable. And one of my nephews said, "You're right." The other one said, "No, you're wrong." And I was wrong. They were able to sustain that success and nearly made it to the playoffs.
Yeah, we'll talk, as I said, more about that later. And as I said, acquisitions make a big difference. They certainly did for the Brewers. One team we haven't talked about that was statistically, projection-wise, hugely disappointing is the Minnesota Twins. I mean, they shouldn't have sucked. They downloaded for example. But the Brewers were mired in what looked like exactly what people predicted for them. An average season, 80-something wins. And then they acquired Willy Adames from the Tampa Bay Rays. And by the way, there's one of the best win-win deals ever, because of what that allowed the Rays to do and what it did for the Brewers. But May 22nd is officially Willy Adames Day in Milwaukee, because they've had one of the best records in baseball since then. And as somebody who watches every game, as my wife will verify, every game, he had a tremendous team effect. Can you predict that? Can you look at how somebody plays in a certain ballpark or what they bring to a game and say, this guy is the right fit for this team? Or is it just the magic of baseball?
No, there's been a lot of debate in the statistical community over the years about, is there a clubhouse effect? Bring in Raul Ibanez, for example, to the Mariners, or Ken Griffey Jr. as he's aging. Is that going to boost the team and pull them together and everything? And the answer is maybe, but you cannot quantify it. So Willy Adames, the effect can be quantified, because he ended up with 4 WAR on the season. The guy he was traded for, which he thought was a win-win, JP Fireeisen, only had 0.2 WAR for the Tampa Bay Rays. So I'm not sure if you're a Tampa fan, you would call that a win-win. The problem was they had the number 1 prospect in baseball coming up, Wander Franco. And so Willy Adames didn't have a place to play in Tampa. So it was a win for Willy. It was a win for the Brewers. And it was sort of a get whatever you can for Tampa Bay.
Well, we're sure glad that they got what they could, and that we got what we got, because he made an incredible change for the team. Shohei Ohtani, who kind of ruined your Sunday. in the leadoff position, has had a year that it defies comparison. You can't just say Babe Ruth. Really, you can't say anybody because of not just home runs, but pitching and base stealing and just total baseball player. Was there data to suggest that that was possible?
No, and I will say, people who compare him to Babe Ruth, do a disservice to Ohtani because he exceeded Babe Ruth when Ruth was pitching and hitting. But for the first 3 seasons of Ohtani's career, he was mostly injured. He was, mediocre when he was on the field. He wasn't able to pitch most of the time because of his injuries. So the statistical projection systems can't just assume a guy's going to be healthy. Is he always going to be injured, right? So they assume his performance going forward based on his previous performance, and it said 1.4 WAR as a hitter and 1.3 as a pitcher. He ended up with 8.1 overall WAR instead of the 2.7. So, and if you tell me that you could see that coming, whether an Angels fan or somebody else, that you knew that was going to happen, no way.
Yeah, and trying to predict future performance based on past performance, we sound like stockbrokers now.
Well, it's the only way you can do it, to be honest.
Yeah, it is so difficult. And you look at the challenges that Christian Yelich has faced. He was an incredible ball player for several years, and he's been an average ball player. And then was a Bellinger the MVP for the Dodgers, who's less than average. It may not even be on the postseason roster, possibly. You can't predict it. It just happens. And I think that illustrates this is a really difficult game. And, that's part of why I love it. Are there any statistics that become more valuable in the postseason? So if I'm looking, say, at the Brewers and Braves series, which of course I am, is there anything that, as I hope for a Brewers win, I should say, well, this gives me hope, or I'm worried about that?
I'd like to say yes. I have a theory, but it's not supported by statistics. And so when we get into the projections, I'll give you my theory. Well, I'll give it to you now, but I'll support it later with my gut feel. I believe that starting pitching is the most important thing in the playoffs. And I believe if you have 2 really good starters, and this theory started developing back when the Diamondbacks won in 2001. They had Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. That's, if you pitch them twice in each series and maybe once in relief, that's 4 wins if they're dominant. And the same thing happened with Schilling and Pedro Martinez with Boston. And I see that with Max Scherzer and Urias and Walker Buehler in Los Angeles, and I also see that with your team, Corbin Burns and the starters they have,
and Brandon Woodruff and Eric Lauer, who's been surprisingly strong.
But the next thing I need to do is figure out how to quantify that theory and then how to test it statistically. Which I haven't figured out
Corbin
yet.
Burns, who's a Cy Young candidate. I'm not sure how that'll work out because that is truly subjective. I'm sure that the baseball writers of America use some statistics, but he only pitched 2 innings. It was called a manager's decision when Craig Counsell took him out. And that brings into focus the importance of managers' decisions in the postseason. In the postseason, when it's all on the line and it's win or go home, well, yeah, you're going to pitch them on short rest, or you're going to send them deeper into a game than you might do, or you're going to pitch Josh Hader, for example, for 2 instead of 1 inning at the end of a game. Now we have to, sorry to say, because of Devin Williams' injury, but the human element and the statistics interact in a way that's very difficult to reconcile, it seems.
Yeah, and I will praise your manager, Craig Counsell, for seemingly picking the right reliever at the right time, going back 3 or 4 years. When they were against the Dodgers in the playoffs, he had a lefty starter, opener, and then he kept on bringing lefties out of the bullpen because the statistics showed that Cody Bellinger and all their left-handed hitters, Jock Peterson and so forth, they couldn't hit left-handed pitching, and so he just took advantage of that, and they won that series.
Well, we could go on, and we are, and we're already behind, and we have several slides to show, including your statistical realities, sort of the ground truths of baseball is what this is. And why don't you talk about those fairly briefly so we can get to our predictions?
Sure. It relates to your last question. Is there anything predictive about that you can get to the playoffs? And like I said, statistically, we can't figure it out. Billy Beane in the book Moneyball basically said, my stuff, my expletive doesn't work in the playoffs, implying that this is a crapshoot. It's a 50-50 proposition. And to support that, I wrote a blog article back in 2008, and I've updated it here. 34 teams have won 100 games in the wild card era. Only 6 won the World Series.
Yeah,
7
that's incredible.
Wild card teams. Yeah, 7 wild card teams won the World Series. So you're better off being a wild card team than a team with 100 wins. That's how crazy the postseason is. Yeah. I don't know. And I look at my own team, the Mariners, 116 wins, set an all-time record. They didn't even make it to the World Series. Whereas my other team, the Cardinals, won the World Series after winning only 83 games. And then for that blog post, I actually calculated all the playoff series, and it's a 49% chance of victory if you're the winning team. And it's probably, gone up maybe a couple percent since then, but it's basically a flip of the coin.
Yeah, which is why you should watch the next game and the next game.
Exactly. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
That's the beauty of baseball in particular. I like watching the Green Bay Packers and Milwaukee Bucks, but baseball's nuances are what attract me so much. So you put that to a scatter plot chart, I think we call it, to prove what you just said. And these plots are all over the map, and they mean everybody has a chance, right?
Exactly. On the vertical scale, you have the number of wins, and that's graphed against the horizontal scale, which is the number of postseason wins, so regular season versus postseason. And you can see on the column of dots on the right side, those are teams that won 11 games, meaning they won the World Series. But those dots are, pretty much distributed like all the rest of the dots. They're around the mean of about, 90-something wins for each of the playoff teams. And if you were to draw a line, it should be an increasing bottom left, upper right correlation line. That doesn't appear to be a line. As a matter of fact, you can do the statistical analysis, which I did.
You can do the statistical analysis. Yeah. I can't.
And the correlation coefficient is only 0.18, which is bad. It's basically, there is no correlation. Really, you get small correlation around 0.25 to 0.3, and then obviously 100% correlation means it's going to happen all the time. But this, once again, it's a coin flip.
This means turn on the TV or go to the stadium and watch postseason baseball, because anything is possible.
Yes.
And I love that. Okay, quick break, very quick break, because we've got to get to our predictions, to tell you that I'm going to take my own break, take a couple weeks away from Figments. This is the 25th episode of the Two Types, and get refreshed. And I'll be back on October 25th with more Figments on reality and some non-political commentary on whatever is happening. I don't even want to think about what might be happening other than postseason baseball at that time. And then I'll come back to on November 1st to Figments, the Power of Imagination, trying to entertain and inspire with an extraordinary guest talking about, I imagine, effective leadership. Happens to be my daughter, who didn't get the gene because she's a much better leader and one of the very experienced military and civilian leader. And it will tie into what I've said before about Afghanistan. So please tune in to that. So back to baseball. Let's talk about the lineup, the bracket. Here it is, not filled in. We don't know until tomorrow when they start. The big disappointment as I look at where the starting palette for postseason baseball is that there were no play-in games today. And yesterday, there could have been 2 play-in games to the play-in game in the AL East and a game 163 in the National League West. And none of that happened. Tell me about your Sunday, Ross. How was that? Did you watch any baseball yesterday?
I sure did. I was in baseball heaven. I'm so glad that Major League Baseball decided to start all the games at the same time.
Yeah.
That way, there's no
So
advantage
let me
if you know
explain that to
someone
the
won.
folks. Let me explain that on the last day of the season, the only time during the year, maybe on opening day, they try to do it a little bit, but every game starts within 5 or 10 minutes of each other. So there are no spoiler alerts required, and it all matters to the very end. Go ahead.
So I had 4 devices going. I was watching the Mariners on DVR. I had my laptop with the Red Sox game on it. I had the iPad with the Yankees game on. I had my cell phone with the Toronto Blue Jays game on. And then when that one, sort of was a blowout, then I switched over to the Cardinals and saw their final game. So it was great, and it was exciting until Shohei Ohtani hit a leadoff home run and dashed my hopes, and I was swearing at the screen. And then they scored again, and then 2 more in the next inning, so it was 4-0 before you knew it. But even then, I've watched the Mariners enough to know that they can come back. It's only a second inning; they're down 4. They can come back, and they have. And I was encouraged when the Red Sox were down 5-1, and the Yankees and the Rays were playing a scoreless game. And then
the Rays are killer, right?
Yeah. But in the end of the day, Red Sox pulled it out in the top of the 9th with a 2-run home run. The Yankees pulled it out in the bottom of the 9th with a walk-off single. The Mariners lost. The Blue Jays lost. So there's no play-in game.
And what
the Blue Jays won, but because Yankees and Red Sox won.
Of all the teams that aren't in the playoffs, that belong in the playoffs, I think the Blue Jays are really up there. They had an extraordinary year under very difficult circumstances with 3 different home parks because of COVID, and I think they've got a bright future. My biggest disappointment is that the New York Yankees are in it at all, because I go back, the Brewers and Braves play on Friday, October 8th at now American Family Field. It will be the Braves' first playoff game in Milwaukee since Game 7 of the World Series in 1958, where they lost to the Yankees and lost the series, having won in 57. And I'm still mad. Just to be clear, as a 6-year-old boy, I listened to that game on the radio, my father's 57 Ford. I'm still upset about that. But,
and that points out another part of my theory is that your team had 2 great pitchers. The Milwaukee Braves had Warren Spahn and Johnny Sain, right? Spahn and Sain, then pray for Wayne.
Pray for rain. Yep.
Yeah. And so they were able to be dominant during that time with those 2 guys that could throw 5 games between them in that era.
I wonder what their arms looked like later in life.
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is people weren't throwing as hard, and they weren't stressing their arms physically the way they are now. Sort of the extreme pitching of the era is really, it's extreme, and it puts a lot of stress on the arms. And we've talked about the importance of pitching. Let me get to my picks, which are mostly gut feel. And of course, let's start at the end, where I picked the Milwaukee Brewers to win the World Series, because I want the Milwaukee Brewers to win the World Series, because I'm going to the World Series. I don't know if I told you, I entered 2 sweepstakes, and I'm pretty sure that I've got to win one of those. And I'll be at a game somewhere with airfare and hotel taken care of by Publishers Clearinghouse or somebody. I'm not sure it is. And that, I got to look at my slides to remember my logic. I picked St. Louis in the wild card game against the Dodgers because LA, chasing those unbelievable Giants, has just had to keep the pedal to the metal so long that at some time the rubber band breaks. And they lost Muncy yesterday. They've got some questions in pitching. It's only 1 game. But if I were going to pick an outlier, I'd pick the Cardinals. And neither of us picked the White Sox, as we said. I have them getting to the ALCS, but I find Tampa boy, they're just relentless. They're at the plate. They're a powerhouse, and again, they made that trade that enabled the lineup they put together. So I think Tampa's there. Having said that, by the time they get to the World Series against the Milwaukee Brewers, in my dreams, then they're out of. They run into pitching and that they can't beat. I realize it's folly, perhaps, to pick against the Giants this year, but I do it anyway because I want the Brewers to win. So let's take a look at your predictions. It had to be hard for you not to go with your heart and advance the Cardinals all the way.
Well, the Cardinals are going to LA and they're playing against the Dodgers. And the pitcher is Max Scherzer, who is the most dominant pitcher in either league this year. He's got like 1 point something ERA with the Dodgers and undefeated with them. And he's a St. Louis native. And I just don't see the Cardinals winning that game. If they do, great, I'll be happy. But my heart is with the Cardinals. My mind tells me they're going to lose that game. And going back to the dominant pitching thing, my prediction is LA all the way through. Brewers are going to beat the Braves because of Brewers' dominant pitching. And I feel like in the American League, Yankees will win the wild card because Garrett Cole is a better pitcher than Nathan Eovaldi. Although I have some friends who will think otherwise, big Red Sox fans. And then the Yankees are going to lose to the Blue Jays. Blue Jays have had to Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays have had their number for the last 2 years, and they're going to keep winning. But then they'll run into the Houston Astros, who I think have the best combination of starting pitching and offense to take them to the World Series, but not as good as the Dodgers. I'm picking the Dodgers to win.
Are they still stealing signs in Houston? I don't follow them very closely.
No. So 2 things quickly about the Cardinals winning streak. There was a great Fangraphs article last week about what's the relationship, predictive value between a long winning streak and how you'll do in the playoffs. Is that going to carry you into the playoffs? And the answer was no. There's no indication that it will. Right. And then another one related to the cheating is that, I don't know if I mentioned this in our first episode, but there was a study on Fangraphs that indicated the cheating really didn't help the Astros that much because there were so many false positives that you're swinging at pitches that you're sure is a strike, right? Well, no, it's not. I mean, sure is a fastball. No, it's a curveball, and you look like a fool. And so the overall effect of that advantage is really not very big.
Not an advantage. Yeah, it had to be a huge distraction too, and it's such a mental game. Well, sadly, we're out of time. We have to get together at some point, maybe in spring training, to review our predictions and see how right or wrong we were. I will tell you, as I think about my own Figment, you can tell me your base postseason Figment. If the Brewers don't advance, I'd love to see Wainwright and Molina together in a Game 7. And I think Yadier Molina is one of my favorite players ever, even though he kicks our butt sometimes. So what's your postseason dream, your Figment?
Well, I would love to see Wainwright and Molina in a Game 7 again. They've done that though, so that's sort of I've been there, done that kind of a thing. One of my past Figments that's never going to happen is to see Felix Hernandez pitch in a playoff game in Seattle, but he's retired now, so I guess I'm just not this year, but going forward, I just want to see the Mariners in a playoff game in Seattle sometime during my lifetime.
Well, I hope that comes true for you. Okay, Ross, thanks. It's always a pleasure. We're going to enjoy the next few weeks, and we'll see how right or wrong we were, and we'll enjoy it either way.
All right. Have a good trip.
All right. Thanks. Folks, that is the end of episode 25 of Various Flavors of Figments, and it goes by so quickly always. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Figments are brought to you by Think Tech Hawaii. We're all nonprofit in this. Don't make any money as citizen journalists, as Jay Vidal likes to say. Hopefully we provide both entertainment and information. And I'd like to remind you that as a nonprofit, Think Deck Hawaii can use your support, financial, not just emotional, financial. And let me close with my usual aloha and go Brewers.